Okay, well, I have 1 o'clock, so let's get started. And let me just welcome everyone. Um, that when Commissioner Boyd joined, she made a comment about the weather, and I hope everybody's ready for the close to 80 degrees tomorrow until we dip back down again. I think Saturday they say we could have snow flurries, so who knows? It's just a crazy, crazy time of the year. But it is, as always, it's good to see everyone. We have a new member of the MX staff that has joined us, and I can't, I'm looking quickly. Is Lee Towers with us yet?
Yes, I am. I'm on mute, but I'm here.
Okay, would you like to introduce our new MHEC staff member?
I would, thank you. As you all know, unfortunately, we lost Dr. Peg Dahl in December. She was our NSP2 grant manager, and a tremendous, tremendous loss for the agency and for the state. She was just a huge asset. But we're very fortunate that we have her successor, Dr. Laura Shank, who comes to us from Hartford Community College. She will be our new grant administrator for NSP. Laura, if you'd like to take a couple minutes to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Laura. It's nice to meet all of you. I'm very excited to be the new NSP2 grant administrator. Just to give you a little bit about my background, I am a nurse, and I've been a nurse educator, a nurse for about 13 years, nurse educator for about 9 years. So I'm also a product of many of the NSP2 grant programs, and they've been a huge part of my success as a nurse and nurse educator. So I'm really excited to take part in this important work and support the nursing workforce in Maryland. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Laura. Welcome. We'll be looking forward, I would assume, from time to time to hearing more about the work that you're doing. Okay. Terrific. And let me just review the agenda quickly. We only have, I thought someone said something. So we have the biannual report on the number of activities, both on the VA benefits, private career schools, and then the institutions of higher ed. Trish McGowan will be presenting that for us. She might be arriving a little bit late, so Emily, we might be starting with you first on the report, the blueprint report, which some of us still refer to as the Kerwin Commission, but to get an update on MHEC's involvement with that. And then, as you know, I will ask that we move into closed session, and I will need a formal vote on that, both a formal motion and a vote on that when it's time for that, to give us a opportunity to talk about the appointment of a new secretary. So with that, let's get on with the agenda. There are no public comments today. And so first order of business would be to approve our minutes from January 17th. And there are two sets of minutes, both the open meeting and then the closed session that we had. So if I could have a motion to approve the minutes, please. Commissioner Serrano, and a second. Commissioner Coleman, are there any edits, amendments, corrections? If not, all in favor of approving the minutes, either raise your hand or please say aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, so the minutes are approved. And Emily, I'm looking quickly. It looks like Trish is not here yet. So why don't you begin with the blueprint report? Oh, I'm sorry, Emily. I jumped. I skipped the committee reports. Let's go back and do that first. So Commissioner Boyd, education policy.
Educational policy continues to wait for issues to be assigned to us at this juncture.
Okay, I think we all know a lot is kind of on hold at this point.
Right.
So thank you for that. And Commissioner Coleman, outreach grants and financial assistance.
Yes, no report. I think the staff is just waiting.
Okay, all right. These may be the quickest committee reports we've ever had. And then Finance and Operations Committee, Mr. Newman.
Yes, we currently have, excuse me, 12 vacancies. However, action has been taken on at least 10 of them so far. We've had several interviews completed. Several positions were closed earlier this month, so we're expecting a lot of activity on these positions. So I think we do have an issue with 2 of the positions that we're trying to resolve, but I think the other 10 we should have them filled by the end of February, early March. So I think we'll be in pretty good shape after that.
Which is right around the corner.
Yes. And we've also had the first of our budget hearings in the General Assembly. Last week, we just had the Office of Student Financial Assistance. There were no recommended reductions to the budget for OSFA, which is great. And then next week, we will have all our remaining budget hearings. We'll have the Maryland Higher Education Commission administration budget, we'll have the Aid to Community Colleges budget, and we'll have the capital budget hearings all next week. So we'll be finished at the end of next week with all our budget hearings.
Wow.
That's terrific. Any questions for Mr. Newman? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
And Commissioner McDaniels, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And let me just say a little intro to this. I know we had talked about having a fuller report from the DEI committee, and originally had planned to do that at this meeting. And after a number of conversations, we decided it would be best to wait until we have a new Secretary of Higher Education appointed and have that conversation when he or she is with us. But Commissioner McDaniels, anything else you want to say about your committee?
No, we, like the other committees, have not met recently, but we're raring to go when we had the opportunity early in the year. But we don't have a significant report for today's meeting.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay. So now, Dr. Dow, because I still don't see Trish, let me turn things over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Good afternoon. Let me share my screen so that you can walk through the book with me. I am here. Usually our director, Trish Gordon-McCown, she presents these biannual reports, but she is unfortunately delayed, so I will be presenting them. We have 3 reports. These are just updates so that you're aware of the activities that are happening on within the Department of Academic Affairs around a variety of approvals. So let me start with the first report. This is on Veterans Affairs, which is often also called the State Approving Agency. That team, over the past 6 months, from July 1st to December 31st, took a total of over 3,300 different types of actions. As a refresher, this team has 1 foot in state policy and 1 foot in federal regulations and federal implementation. So they are really charged with ensuring that federal rules are upheld for our academic programs for which veterans can utilize their education benefits towards. So they are, like I said, a little bit of both state rules as well as federal rules. Happy to go into any details. I also want to recognize that we have Associate Director Everett Jackson with us to answer any questions you may have about their recent activities over the past 6 months. Questions, comments, concerns before I move on to the next report? And Everett, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, Emily, not at this time, but to say good afternoon to everyone.
Hi, Everett. I think we're good, Emily. I don't see any hands.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next report, which is our private career schools. So again, I believe Eric Jackson is also on the line. He is our Associate Director for Career and Workforce Education and works directly with a variety of entities that we often call private career schools. Over the past 6 months, they have acted on 121 different items, including the approval of 4 new schools. If I can draw your attention to those 4 schools, I just want to alert you that they had been previously approved on an interim basis during COVID. During COVID, we couldn't really do site visits. So we said that they could begin operation as soon as and then we would be able to do a site visit and do a formal approval. So that's why it says previously approved as an interim approval. So 4 new schools. These new schools, while it's only 4, are really, when a new school seeks to operate in Maryland, there is a lot that goes into their application. We ensure that their curriculum meets licensing standards, that again, they have the appropriate space, the appropriate financial requirements. So 4 new schools is pretty impressive within a 6-month period. Additionally, worth noting is this group, this unit under Eric's supervision, entertains what we call training provider questionnaires. These questionnaires help us identify what entities require full approval, what entities require an exemption, and you can see those details at the end of the report. So 108 different entities over the past 6 months showed interest in becoming some kind of training provider, and then Eric and his team will determine whether or not that training meets the definition of a private career school and requires full approval. So with that, I will stop there. And Eric, do you have anything to add?
I don't at this time, just to say it's a pleasure to meet you all.
Thanks, Eric. Nice to meet you too. Any
Eric,
questions on that report? Okay, Emily, I think we're good.
great. Let me also just add, Eric has been serving as the acting associate director and is now officially the associate director for our career workforce unit team. So we're excited that we are able to kind of grow our own and see that growth within our agency. So let me take you to the last report. Sorry, a little bit of a whirlwind here. I scroll through all of these updates. So our last report is from our degree granting institutions and is on academic program review. I have Lindsay Bates with us. She is our associate director for this group. This group, as you might remember, is now our new academic program review team. It is the 10 new positions that we received in light of the coalition settlement. And like I said, is overseen by Lindsay Bates as our associate director. Over the past 6 months, their team has entertained or reviewed 288 different types of proposals and or acted on different types of requests. This we have organized a bit differently by segment: independent colleges, our public four-year colleges and universities, and our community colleges. And the report has a variety of additional information. I'll stop there. Lindsay, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Hi, everyone. No, not at this time. Thank you.
Great. See if there are any questions.
I just have a quick question on like this wording, like substantial sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Substantial modifications to existing program and non-substantial. What's the main difference for that?
Sure. So substantial modification in the simplest form is when an institution is making a change that amounts to 33% or more. So we do a simple calculation of credits in and credits out. So that's our current definition of substantial modification. We are well poised at this point to pull together a work group to reconsider a definition of substantial modification. So in a couple of months, probably the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, I may be coming back to the commission with some regulatory changes around the definition of substantial modification. The reason why I say that is because we do not take into account changes that may be dictated by an accreditor. So a programmatic accreditor says, well, we need you to add these new learning outcomes into your curriculum. Do we as an agency really need to review that? I don't know. That's up for debate. So we're pulling together a work group to evaluate our current definition of substantial modification and consider regulatory changes. So that's the definition of a substantial modification. I gave you a bit more, sorry.
Okay.
And commissioners might remember that in a couple of the reviews that we did, this became an issue that we considered. So I think it's helpful that MHEC is reviewing this. Commissioner Boyd, you had your hand up?
Yes, Dr. Dahl, I'm looking at the new degree programs where there are 18 at public four-year schools and also the 20 at independent colleges and universities, as well as the 6 public community colleges. Are you in a position to tell us what degree programs they're referring to?
Absolutely. If you bear with me while I scroll down. Yep, they're right here. I totally passed them. So new degree programs 20, and it lists the institution, the degree, and the academic program. So several from Capital Technology University. So those are our independents. You can see the public 4 years, a handful from Bowie, Coppin, and Morgan. A couple from College Park, UMES, and then the community colleges, kind of a smattering across the state.
So Emily, will you go back up and can we just scroll through that a little slower so that people can just take a look? I realize it was in our board material, but.
Absolutely. So we'll start from the bottom and I'll scroll upwards.
Okay.
You can see a number of doctoral programs, graduate programs, a handful of education programs, the Internet of Things. So let me hop over to our independent institutions. Data science, we're seeing a handful that's a burgeoning field.
I'm sorry, what is that?
Data science.
Oh, data science, okay.
Mm-hmm. And then up to Cap Tech.
Interesting.
They're far more focused in obviously technology, engineering, and sciences.
And it looks like there were not many objections. There may have been one objection raised to the new programs.
Correct. One objection. Goucher College had proposed a master's in digital communication. University of Baltimore objected. We approved it or recommended it for implementation, and University of Baltimore chose not to take it to the full commission.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Like on the report, like on the institutions themselves, do we know? I guess we can just see like the institution, but like, is there a pattern in terms of like the for-profit institutions versus like kind of state institutions? Are we seeing more programs kind of coming out of those institutions? And if so, like, I don't want to say that for-profit institutions are like kind of contributing more to student debt, but like, is that being considered in terms of like these programs kind of thriving in a certain area? If I'm seeing it, like, I'll just go on a limb here to say like the for-profit institutions are the ones that are creating more programs, and they're kind of the biggest culprits in terms of student debt. Are we contributing to a bigger problem?
Thank you for that question. The vast majority of our program approval process is with our nonprofit or public institutions. We do not have any in-state for-profit degree granting institutions in Maryland. Any for-profit degree granting institution is considered an out-of-state institution that is operating here in Maryland. So everything in this report is really only reflects our in-state institutions, none of which are for-profit. That's a slightly different for our private career schools. Many of our private career schools, because they're considered small businesses, are indeed for-profit. So they're slightly different, and that's why they're in a different report for private career schools. But on the degree granting side, we do not have any degree granting for-profit institution. I hope I'm clear. I'm happy to answer additional questions.
Okay. I was just looking like Capital, maybe I'm very new to this. Capital Technology University.
They're a nonprofit private institution.
Okay.
Yep. They're located just outside of DC within the Beltway area. They might actually be just north of the Beltway. I actually don't know, but yes, in that area.
Okay.
And Dr. Dow, I should know the answer to this, but aside from authorizing for-profit institutions to operate in Maryland, do we review their programs at all?
We do. We do. We review them. That's actually, we're trying to create efficiencies with how we review out-of-state institution program review. So you may start to see in future reports some of that program review from the out-of-state institutions on this report. So we're trying to clean up some of that efficiency and create some efficiency there. But yes, we review their academic programs and we either approve them or deny them.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Dell, there was only one that was a partnership with an existing four-year school. Going way back down. Yes.
Program partnerships, yep. Please forgive me, let me scroll there.
It's down near the bottom.
Yep. Oh, those are the withdrawals. Sorry, let me just get there. I apologize. Do you know what page it's on?
No.
Commissioner Boyd. Lindsay, are you able to speak to the partnership?
It looked like it was toward the bottom and it was with the four-year school.
So that chart, when she does find it, speaks to not articulation agreements. So there are more articulation agreements. We've recently changed our regulations. So in the next report, that'll be more clear for those partnerships. This reflects partnerships where two universities partner to offer a program or offer it at a regional higher education center.
I see.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Lindsay, for that clarification.
Commissioner Coleman, I think you had your hand up, and then Commissioner Serrano. Commissioner,
Yeah, my question is, when you're doing the approval of the institution, either they're private or public, how much weight do you put on whether it's all the courses are virtual versus in person?
Sure. So if the program is fully online, it goes through a different approval process because we would then we consider that not operating in Maryland. They are operating in Maryland if they meet a certain threshold of offering a certain amount of the program in person here in Maryland. So we weight it, and depending on the nature of their operation, their approval might be different. So it is a consideration, and depending on what they plan to do, whether or not it is physically here in Maryland, determines the nature of their approval, the institutional approval to offer that academic program to either Maryland residents or physically here in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep. I hope I answered your question, Commissioner Coleman.
I think so.
Okay.
and Commissioner Serrano, did you have another question?
Yeah. So on the issue of the approval, when we're looking at the application, is the application is what the program is about, who it's going to serve. I'm assuming we're probably looking at the demand for the program, the market for that. Is student debt is like financing of that program, is that a factor that's going into, like, so if the students that are coming into a new program, if they're, are they self-funded or they're funded by their employer or something? Is that a factor that comes into these programs?
Yeah, the cost of tuition does. It's not something that we can deny a program proposal for, but it is something that needs to be included in a program proposal for review.
So like just the cost itself, it's not like, but there's no, like, the school's not providing any feedback and saying, well, most of our students will be funded this way. We're meeting a need. No.
Yeah, just simply a, like you said, cost of tuition.
And Commissioner Boyd?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
I'm going to go back to my little point here. I'm sorry, I might sound like a broken record here, but I just, like, I feel like, we're talking from like institution to institution here. We're saying, okay, you have all the ingredients to have a good program, and this is going to be great. And our job is to make sure you have those ingredients. But I think one of the key ingredients I think we're seeing nationally, we're seeing a lot of like student debt. Like we talk about debt forgiveness, loan forgiveness, and we're seeing these kind of thriving of programs and institutions are benefiting great because they're getting a lot of students coming in and they're taking out debts to, like, to pay for getting to this program. They're sold this, great program. But if they're getting into a lot of debt, I think we're getting a bigger problem. I think we're not looking at it from the standpoint of the student as opposed to the institutions. And I don't, that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if it means anything, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Mr. Dorsett, I don't know if you have a response to that. Is that why you raised your hand?
Yes, not so much of a response, but just asking Dr. Dow, once a institution is approved, that means that if a student, if a Maryland resident attends that institution, they are eligible for funds from our Maryland state scholarships and programs to use it at that institution, correct?
I would say yes, depending on the nature of the scholarship. So as you know, some scholarships are only eligible for our public institutions. Some are eligible for all of the institutions. Some are even allow for the private career schools to be included.
Right.
So generally speaking, yes, but it would depend on the scholarship.
Okay. So I mean, just to add in there, when we do approve these, it opens up the door for opportunities for our Maryland residents, not only to seek an education at that institution offering that program, but possibly eligible for the funds that we provide to Maryland residents, and therefore, could reduce that debt or leave the student with no debt while still having that opportunity.
Okay. And Commissioner Boyd?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, you look like I have a hand signal from you, so it must be. So Commissioner Serrano, I'm not certain that I got the full gist of what your concern was. I know, do you need to say any more about that, or are you good?
Well, I'm just looking at it from like, it's like we have 2 institutions, right? We have MHEC, we have the institutions that are promoting or proposing a new field or a new area.
Right.
And we're kind of going through the checklist and say, do they have this? Do they have that? Do they have that? And their job is to provide, say, we have a demand, we have this, and this is what the market share. But I think a key factor in all of it is the student and the debt, the financing of it. And I think, and if it does mean if we approve it, they are able to tap into certain financial resources that the MHEC provides. But I think the kind of utilization review of those resources and how it's paid for is, I think, I just think it should be a factor that comes into play, because I think nationally we're seeing this conversation about student debt and loan forgiveness and so forth, and I just think that we're talking from institutions to institutions, and the needs of both institutions are being satisfied, but the needs of the students who are part of those institutions that are feeding both institutions are increasingly not being satisfied. The debt is going higher and higher.
Dr. Dow, did you have something to say?
Yes, if I may. So as you might remember, we have in our state plan this idea of studying what it means to be affordable. It's actually one of the first items. the idea of affordability is a tricky one, because you've got to balance the two things. It costs something to run an academic program. You have to pay for faculty. You may have a variety of resources that you need. But at the same time, we also recognize there is a massive amount of student debt out there, particularly at the graduate level. And that's where a lot of students end up going, is they seek additional education. So we as a state, as part of the state plan, have said we need to study this idea of affordability. What does it mean? We also talk about things like the idea of return on investment, that, you know, you're going to go into this program, but you're probably going to enter into a high wage paying job. What does that mean in terms of the debt that you incur and balancing that out? So let me say that we have a commitment, and we're actively internally trying to figure out how we study this idea of affordability and how we can create some data products or research products that kind of highlight that issue. How do we measure it? How do we capture it? What does that look like? The second thing is I will say our institutions, at least from my perspective, are very sensitive to this idea of affordability. They do a number of initiatives that coincide with everything that happens in Mr. Dorsett's office of student financial assistance. They offer a variety of scholarships. I think again, back to this idea of affordability, it's not just about overall tuition. There are considerations at the programmatic level that I think play a role when we talk about affordability and the cost of higher education and what that means for student debt. So, so that's kind of one, to communicate. We are discussing internally on how we study the idea of affordability, and two, to recognize that affordability may vary even within one institution from program to program or degree to degree, depending on the nature of the education being provided. So food for thought.
And if I could just add to that a little bit, and I'm obviously going to have the data more about our private independent colleges and universities, but NACUBO, which is the National Association of College and University Business Officers, reports on the tuition discount rate every year. And on average, independent colleges are discounting tuition at a rate of 54% for entering first-year students. So there's considerable college university money going in to support students. And I know the public universities are doing the same thing. I just don't have the data on what percentage they are actually using to award to first-time students. So, you know, and Dr. Dell's absolutely correct. There's a big difference between the debt that's carried because of undergraduate work versus what's being carried in graduate and professional work. And that requires a different kind of analysis than our undergraduate programs. I don't know if that helps at all, Commissioner Serrano, but you know, I think that the bottom line with all of this is that institutions know that they have got to provide significant financial support to students, and that's happening on a regular basis.
Yeah, I just think if it could be somehow integrated in the approval process. I think it would be meaningful for the institutions that they're trying to promulgate certain programs and say we want these programs to be on board, to know that they're on high alert, to say that, like, if these programs go on board, if we're going to approve this program, we want to make sure that the students who are coming out of that program are having some way to pay it back, the debt. It's not just so it's going to be beneficial to them, or there's some way of financing it.
So I think what you're getting at is the outcome issue, you know, that if students graduate with this program, what are the opportunities they have once they leave and have acquired that education? So.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember way back in the day when I was in grad school, they had me try to recruit students, like mostly Latino and Black students, and it was a private university. They said, well, can you help? And the dollar amount per year for this master's program was like $60,000 per year, and then across the town in Atlanta was like, you know, the dollar amount was $20,000, and I just became, maybe I was just guilty for being honest, but I just said, go to the state program. It's much cheaper, and you'll get the same jobs as the one that went to the private program. They eventually got rid of me at that capacity, so I was no longer a recruiter, but I felt like I was telling the truth. I just felt like I didn't want to see these young, vulnerable kids who were 22 years old and like getting pushed into this master's program at this prestigious private college, and the college was making a killing out of it. And I just felt like somebody needs to speak up for this debt, because these kids, when they graduate and the bursar's office goes after them and says, you owe, $100,000, they're not giving.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right. Anything else on this report? Okay. Thank you. And Dr. Dow, do you want to move on to the blueprint?
Absolutely. Thank you. And let me just say thanks to our associate directors for joining and answering questions. Greatly appreciate their time. Okay, let me share my screen yet again. Okay. Okay. So I have asked to add this to the agenda today. So as commissioners, you are aware of what MHEC is expected to do and what we are planning to do as it relates to this accountability implementation board implementation plan. So let me take you back in time and tell you a little story about this. All started in 2016. With the establishment of the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. This is also more known as the Kerwin Commission. This commission was expected to make policy recommendations to enable Maryland's education system to perform at the level of the world's best systems. So they had a heavy task to evaluate pre-K all the way into college readiness and what it means to be workforce ready. They were also expected to review and recommend update funding formulas, particularly for local education agencies. They had a 2018 preliminary report, so they met quite a bit between 2016 and 2018. They had a preliminary report with technical supplement. I believe they had a consulting firm come in and help provide feedback on their report and their findings. They also had an interim report in 2019, and then a final report in 2020. And I'll be happy to post these slides so that you can see these things. But you can see between 2016 and 2020, there were not only a lot of reports that were produced because of this work, but there were quite a few meetings, expert opinions brought in, and information to inform their recommendations. MHEC did not officially have a seat at the commission. We were not officially part of the composition of the commission. USM did, University System of Maryland, the chancellor participated. And so we watched. When we were asked to engage, we engaged, but we weren't officially part of the commission and the production of these materials. In light of all of that work, quite a bit of legislation was passed between 2018 and 2021. You can see here 5 different bills over those 3 years were passed that implemented a variety of the recommendations that were provided in that 2020 report. House Bill 1300 in 2021 is really the big chunk of this work. It's about a 200-page bill that really does massive changes, both on funding issues as well as policy issues. I would say about 85% of that is with pre-K through 12 issues. There's a big chunk of wide sweeping changes around early childhood education, making sure students are ready for kindergarten, what that looks like, making sure disadvantaged populations have access to high quality early childhood education opportunities. And then, like I said, a lot of stuff around funding formulas, making sure our local education agencies are receiving adequate funding to implement these policy changes, and then issues around readiness for post-secondary education. So with that bill, the House Bill 1300, the legislature created an accountability implementation board. So now that those bills have passed, and because it's such a big lift, they've created this implementation board to hold appropriate entities accountable for implementing the various changes. So the board is to evaluate the data submitted to it and assess how well the many components of Blueprint for Maryland's Future are working to achieve its desired outcome of equal access to high quality education. So again, this board really is about accountability, and it's about the implementation of House Bill 1300, which I realize is commonly known as the Blueprint. By January 1st of each year, the board is to review the use of school level expenditures, including poverty grants and special education funding, and monitor school system compliance with the requirements of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So again, primarily focused on early childhood education into the K through 12 system. There are 7 members on the board. They're all appointed by the governor, and they all have a 6-year term. They had their first board meeting on November 15th, 2021. So they function much like you all do as commissioners. And they are overseeing the accountability implementation staff as this progresses. Last, the Accountability Implementation Board really only is supposed to exist for the next 10 years. So this is not meant to be a permanent entity, but really is meant to be an oversight to ensure that the blueprint is implemented appropriately. So the Accountability Implementation Board, over the past 6 months, has been working hard to create an implementation plan. That was their first task per the legislature, is to create a comprehensive implementation plan. So they did that, and it is available online. It was released this past December 2022. So AIB has an implementation plan. Now what needs to happen is every unit of government responsible for implementing any part of this legislation, including local school boards, they are required to submit its own implementation plan to the Accountability Implementation Board for approval. So there are a handful of things that MHEC does need to do in light of these this blueprint legislation and the Accountability Implementation Board. The board may withhold funding, so there are some significant consequences. The board may withhold funding to any agency without an approved implementation plan. So they have some authority here that we need to be conscious of. And initial plans are due March 15th. So the MHEC plan, we need to submit our plan to AIB by March 15th, as well as every other entity except for one, I believe. I believe they got a different due date. So let me walk you through very briefly the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan, the AIB plan, what they produced December 2022. It is another extensive document that has lots of information and lots of details. They have organized the blueprint into 5 pillars, one being early childhood education, the second being high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, the third being college and career readiness, the fourth being more resources for students to be successful, and the fifth being governance and accountability. So these are the 5 pillars. So they start with 5 pillars. Then, before I get into that, let me also explain, they have 5 different outcomes as well. So 5 pillars, 5 outcomes. The first outcome is to increase the rate of students entering kindergarten who are on track to successfully graduate on time and move on to post-secondary education. This is, again, really about making sure our young children are well prepared for kindergarten and beyond. The second one is to ensure that all Maryland students graduate college and career ready by fiscal year 2032. So this is where we play a little bit of a role in making sure that we talk about college and career readiness standards, what they look like, making sure our colleges and universities can weigh in on that. The third is that achievement gaps are reduced if not eliminated, across all grades and student groups and LEAs by fiscal year 2032. So ensuring that achievement gaps are reduced. Participation in post-college and career-ready pathways increases equitably across all student groups, and that 45% of high school graduates earn a valuable CTE, industry credential, or complete high school level or a registered apprenticeship by fiscal year 2032. So making sure that when students are in high school, they really are well poised to go the college route, go the workforce route, go both routes, but ready by the time they graduate to do either of those, a post-college and career readiness pathway. And last, oh yes.
And what CTE, could you please define?
Yep, it is career technical education.
Okay.
Yep, career technical, so really applied education in the high school world, whether
Okay.
that's talking about engineering skills, talking about writing skills, career technical education. The last outcome is remediation rates in Maryland community colleges across all student groups and colleges are reduced by fiscal year 2032. So an understanding again around this issue of college readiness and ensuring that our students are ready for college level work, particularly at our community colleges. So these are the implementation plan outcomes. They have noted, AIB has noted that they may change some of these outcomes and add to these outcomes, but these are the kind of broad scope outcomes that they have outlined in the plan. So again, back to the pillars. They have the 5 pillars. With each pillar, they have a number of objectives that you can see on the screen. So for example, in pillar 1, they have an objective to expand high quality, publicly funded, full day pre-kindergarten. So that's kind of a big deal. They have another objective about assessing student readiness for kindergarten, and a third objective, expanding family support. So with each of these pillars, they have all these different objectives. And with each objective, they have tasks and subtasks and even more than that. So this is just an example. This is a screenshot of the plan itself. I know it's kind of hard to read, but you can see that this is pillar 1, objective 1, and they have a task 2. So this is the second task, is to expand access to full day pre-kindergarten for 4-year-old children between 300 and 600% of the federal poverty level on a sliding scale. You can see on the other side of the screen a third task that is to implement high quality mixed delivery pre-K systems. Then you can see even further, they have subtasks, and those subtasks have requirements or guidance. So again, this is a fairly detailed document and really gets into the weeds of expectations. Even more so with all of this information, with every task or subtask, they have outcome measures, they have milestones, expectations for timelines, expectations for reports, implementation considerations, and technical assistance. So again, just a lot of information in this implementation plan. So what does this mean for MHEC? I want to recognize, I believe Bryson Barksdale is on the call. He has been attending many of these meetings, paying attention to what needs to happen for MHEC. So want to recognize his good work on this. There are a few objectives where MHEC is mentioned explicitly. So I'll go into these in a little bit of detail, but we do play a role in early childhood education, and it's really about training early childhood educators appropriately so that they are well qualified teachers and staff within our early childhood education facilities. Pillar 2, we have a lot to deal with around, again, producing high quality teachers within the traditional K through 12 system. So recruiting and supporting high quality and diverse teachers to meet workforce needs, and increase rigor of teacher preparation programs and licensure requirements. Then in pillar 3, there's a lot about college and career readiness, making sure that students have equitable opportunities to become college and career ready, and she'll meet the college career ready standards at an equal rate. And then the last one is in governance and accountability and supporting the blueprint implementation planning, and that's really about the work that needs to get done. So let me break this down just a little bit further for you. Agency-specific initiatives kind of fall into 3 big buckets. One is the Teaching Fellows Scholarship. As you might remember, we have a Teaching Fellows Scholarship. It provides pretty substantial funding to students that are interested in entering into the teaching workforce. So the blueprint requires that there's an increase in funding through the governor's budget bill, requires MHEC to do unique outreach to interested students, really ensuring that there's a diverse pool of students receiving the Teaching Fellow Scholarship, reviewing the eligibility, and revising some of the criteria for the Teaching Fellow Scholarship. There will now be an annual report that MHEC will have to produce and send to not only the AIB, but the General Assembly around this issue of diversity, making sure that scholarship awardees is a diverse applicant pool, explaining any rejected applications, and explaining expenditure. So that's one very specific element that we will, as an agency, have to implement around the Teaching Fellows Scholarship. Another one is the Loan Assistant Repayment Program for public school teachers. This really, the AIB implementation plan requires MHEC to provide technical assistance to teachers to be able to access this Loan Assistant Repayment Program. The last is the Teacher Quality Diversity Program. This is a grant that goes out to the colleges and universities to do similar outreach and really ensure, again, a diverse and high quality pool of pre-licensure teachers. So it establishes the funding requirements for the Teacher Quality Diversity Program, requires MHEC to provide technical assistance, do outreach and awareness, and again, issues around diversity and making sure that we are diversifying the teacher pipeline. That too has an annual report on August 1st, but that starts next year, not this year. So those are the 3 agency specific, those are specific subtasks that say MHEC shall do X around blueprint initiatives. There are a number of other subtasks or tasks where MHEC is supposed to be a coordinating or a resource entity. So for example, MSDE is supposed to do this, this, and this in coordination, in collaboration with resources, with MHEC and other entities. So these are coordinated initiatives with other entities. So again, this idea of early childhood education, talking about alternative certification pathways, we will be referenced or resourced for that. Recruiting high quality and diverse teacher candidates, that is a to-do for MSDE, but in consultation with MHEC. Considering alternative teacher pathways, things like apprenticeship programs or paraprofessionals into teacher pathways. Consulting or providing input on college readiness standards, what it means to be college ready. And then we have a handful of collaborative reports. MSDE is required to submit a report on how they're recruiting teachers. Again, that's an annual, but starts next year. And then MSDE is required to submit a report on MLDS is required to submit a report on the quality and diversity of teachers in the workforce. And that is an annual report due July 1st, but we are a consulting or a coordinating entity to do that report. So again, we are required to submit our implementation plan, how we're going to do all of these things on the last 2 slides by March 15th to AIB. AIB will then review those plans and either approve them or provide feedback for changes. And I assume go through kind of an iterative drafting process. So this does not require your approval, but certainly wanted to make you all aware that this is a thing that our agency will have to do. We are part of the blueprint in these variety of ways, and I'll stop there and happy to answer questions.
So any questions or comments?
I know I gave you a lot.
You did, it was a great report, Emily. And Commissioner Coleman? Commissioner Coleman. You're muted.
Will the commissioner be informed from time to time your progress and what you're doing from time to?
Well, yes, I can certainly make sure we make an effort to keep you aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Absolutely, I can make sure that we provide updates when things are moving along. Absolutely.
Thanks.
And Dr. Dell, did you say that our first report on our plan, the MHEC plan, is due March 15th?
Correct.
And are we in good shape? Are we on track to have that ready?
I think we're on track. We've met with AIB a couple times now to get some just insight what they're expecting for the report. They've been very clear, get to the point. These do not need to be lengthy plans. They need to be detailed, but not necessarily, everything in the kitchen sink kind of situation. There is a special report that has to be a MHEC MSDE report just on teacher preparation. I expect to be in touch with MSDE in the next week or so to coordinate and figure out how to submit that plan. So I think we're in good shape. This is going to be kind of my focus over the next couple of weeks in advance of March 15th, but I'm not too worried. I think we're in good shape. A lot of these things we already do, and if we don't do them, then we can certainly highlight what we can do over the next several years.
And if I could just jump in, I know Commissioner Burrow had her hand up, but on the collaborative report, will MSDE and MHEC also work on the college readiness together?
I hope that is the case. So let me also share with you that MSDE has engaged, per law, again, this is part of the blueprint. MSDE was required by law to hire a third-party entity to evaluate the current standards of what it means to be college and career ready. They have started that process. They have hired an entity called AIR. I think it's called American Institute for Research. I think that is the acronym. It's AIR. They are doing a twofold study, both quantitative and qualitative, around college readiness standards. So they are using higher ed data to evaluate what it means to be college ready across the board. So that is their qualitative side of the study. They are also engaging in a variety of focus groups as we speak right now to talk with faculty, to talk with campus leadership about what it means to be college readiness. They are using the traditional standards of particularly English and math, but they are also looking at science readiness standards. So AIR has to submit, I believe, an interim report, either April or May, and a final report sometime over the summer. So we as an agency have been helping to coordinate to make sure the AIR staff are in touch with the right people at the colleges and universities, so that they can be best educated on what this means for Maryland to have a statewide standard of college readiness.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Burrow, did you have a question?
Yes, I was curious. I've heard some sound bites regarding service learning hours from the new governor, and I didn't do any research, so I'm not particularly familiar with that concept. My question, notwithstanding that, is to what extent does this idea of high schoolers having opportunities for service learning hours qualify as apprenticeship or toward college readiness, or is it something distinct that really needs to be thought about as other than college readiness or apprenticeship?
So I will speak just from my own personal perspective, just being on the sidelines on many of these conversations. I think it is a separate issue. I think they are distinct in the idea that what Governor Moore is proposing, we've seen some legislation on it, is different. It's complementary, but different than what this idea of college readiness and doing post-college readiness pathways, what that looks like. I could be wrong, but that is my understanding, is that they are distinct issues. Again, complementary, but distinct.
Okay, thank you. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Yeah, I had a quick one. So on the going back to like at least for like the teaching for teachers, and then for like kind of para-educators or kind of like the teaching assistants. Right now we have like the teaching fellowship program. That's something that we're trying to focus and get more diverse teachers in the pipeline. And from my understanding, that this the Kerwin would basically it kind of gets the funding up a lot, so we can get more teachers. Now, I guess the question is like, do we have we been, I'm assuming we probably have been looking at like who's been applying, who's getting it, who's not been getting it, what we can do to improve the kind of the yield of people who are getting the teaching fellowship. Is it just a matter of like, now that we have more money, that we can actually try to really market it more and try to get more people in the pipeline? That's one thing, one question. Throw another question real quick. It's like kind of the para-educator, the pre-K, that I think is going to be a tougher situation, because I think it like I'm just thinking, because we already have a limited supply of para-educators and educators as it is now, and now we have a population that's like, you know, like 3 or 4 years old. You know, a lot of, I'm thinking English language learners, lots of them, a lot of kids who really need bilingual teachers, bilingual para-educators. That's going to be tough for us to kind of meet that yield. And so I guess what are we doing to try to address that pending problem? Because it's easy for this accountability board to say, we need, you know, 4,000 more teachers, you know, who are bilingual in these languages in PG County. Great, yeah, but how do we find them? And what do we have to do to get them?
Right.
So I think you hit on a number of issues that are exactly, this is a little bit out of my territory, and I certainly, you know, wouldn't want to speak on behalf of MSDE by any means. My understanding of some of the challenges is, again, through meetings that I have sat in around early childhood education, is there is, as you can imagine, a overlap between the idea of early child care and early childhood education. And I think there is a struggle with distinguishing appropriate credentials for individuals who are running a child care center versus individuals running an early childhood education center. And those are distinct issues that span birth to 5 years of age. So I think that is part of the issue around this idea of pipeline into the working profession of working with young children. Is it just about childcare, or is it about early childhood education? So I think that's one issue. And then you're absolutely right, talking about the diversity of not only the children that engage in either of those two realms, but then also the diversity of the individuals running those kinds of programs, teaching in those kinds of programs, and running those facilities. I think the additional challenge, Commissioner Serrano, you talk about this idea of affordability and the idea of return on investment. There is, you're asking me to go get a 4-year degree to essentially babysit a child. That is a sentiment that is out there around this idea of early child care versus early childhood education, and this idea of pay for early childhood educators that are really teaching foundational skills to our children, but may not be getting a teacher's salary. Does that make sense? So I think that's why there's so much focus in the blueprint around early childhood, is to alert to these issues around the idea of what it means to have a credential and run an early childhood education facility, and the pay equity in that world. So I don't think I have an answer for you. MHEC plays a role in the sense of paying attention to MSBE's requirements to be an early childhood educator. We will then make sure that academic programs, and the colleges and universities do this already, right? They're already in tune with what MSBE is requiring for licensing and credentials for the teacher population. But I think that's where we're headed, is reevaluating the licensing and credentials for either early childhood care or early childhood education, or both, and what that looks like. So I think that's where MHEC plays a role when it comes to early childhood education.
Sorry, can I ask a quick follow-up? Like, do you get a sense that the implementation board is like at least for the plan, because the plan itself seems like it's very kind of guided towards metrics, right? It's like, we'll give you this much money, we want this much people, you will be tasked to do this. But the reality is, again, as we kind of laid out, that they're very different, right? A pre-K population is very different than a 11th or 12th grade high school population. It's like English language learners, like special needs, special education, that all of those needs really, really matter in that population more. To find the supply of workers into that, it's really kind of a real change in terms of how we see, like, we've traditionally thought, okay, well, like, college faculty will get paid more than, like, elementary school teachers because they're preparing college kids. Well, no, because like they actually have, like, we know more that we have elementary school teachers have a bigger impact on the kids' kind of formative development than a college professor would. But so that requires a lot of change. And I just feel like, do you feel like the board is actually sensitive to these realities? It's like, it's not just kind of we write a, do an implementation plan and they will come, right? All these teachers will sign up to be, I mean, are they sensitive to this? Or I don't want to see us get punished for basically trying to be realistic of saying, hey, like, where are we going to find all these bilingual people, like, to come teach these classes, like, pre-K. So.
No, I do. I think they are sensitive to it. If nothing else, is indicated by a massive implementation plan that really digs deep into the tasks and subtasks for each of those objectives within each of those pillars. They are very metric focused. In fact, there are some upcoming meetings that will be the initial start of how they measure those outcomes and what that looks like, what MHEC has to offer, what MLDS can offer, what MSBE collects, so on and so forth. So I think we got to give it a little bit of time to see how this all unfolds. But I mean, I think they are committed to that. Another piece to this, and I don't think I'm answering your question, but I think it's worth sharing. Another piece to this blueprint and the implementation plan is an idea of a career ladder, that individuals who are entering into the education profession have opportunity for growth and opportunity for diversity in their own career, in a variety of ways, and what that means in terms of pay scale and advancement, that you are no longer necessarily, you don't have to be a teacher for 30 years, that there will be a variety of other roles within the education system that you can go and get re-credentialed for, or up-credentialed for, and really pursue a career ladder. So I think that's another piece to this, and that may be the space where we talk about bilingual individuals getting credentials to be in the classroom. So I want to make everybody aware that there is also quite a bit of attention around changing the teaching profession in a way that I think is quite progressive.
Thank you. Anything else before we move on? Dr. Dodd, thank you. That was very, very helpful to get. I know it was a lot of material, but it was a pretty, given everything that there was to cover, it was a good broad overview of what the components are and then what our role is at MHEC. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyd, do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question this time. I don't know why this is tricking us with the light, but it seems to me that there's a huge emphasis on the academics. I didn't hear anything in terms of the developmental maturity of students for the college experience, like where is that? Things like dealing with independence, students who have some sense of time management. It's just worth noting that as you go forward, is that I don't see them addressing that. And yet, when you consider the pandemic and what's going on with young people today, where they wonder, do they have any skin in anybody's game called academic? Somebody's going to have to account for that.
So yes, thank you for that. When we have really made an effort, higher ed as a whole, not just our agency, but also the institutions, University System of Maryland, MAC, MICUA, we have made a real concerted effort to navigate this idea of college readiness with MSDE, because the campuses in particular really understand everything that you just said, that a student can demonstrate academic aptitude for college material, but they may not have the additional important but often considered auxiliary skills to be successful in college. So, again, we've made a concerted effort to make sure that the AIR team, that group that is doing the college readiness evaluation, really make sure that the campuses are present in those focus groups to talk about exactly what you're saying, the idea of time management. Should an attendance record be, and I'm not saying that it should, but questions around should an attendance record be an indicator of college readiness? If you haven't been able to show up to classes in high school, are you going to be able to show up to classes in college independently, right? Without the resources, or maybe you don't have resources, right? And then talking about systematic issues around poverty and access and resources, right? It gets complicated. We can't just talk about college readiness as whether or not you've got a certain score on the SAT. It no longer can be that. And our colleges know that. I think our agency knows that. And so making sure that the AIR team recognizes that in some way, shape, or form when we talk about college readiness is so important.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right. It's a complicated issue when we talk about college readiness. I'm hopeful that that comes out in these various exercises through these implementation plans, the study with AIR, and other mechanisms.
Mm-hmm. I think Commissioner Barreau was onto it in her talk about service learning, externships, internships, all of these experiences in the real world sort of build the maturity that we're talking about that many students just are not exposed to.
Good, thank you. Dr. Dow, thank you again, and thank you to the entire MHEC staff today for the various reports, excuse me, and for your comments and weighing in on things. I know you all are doing double duty, so we appreciate that, and we hope that maybe that's not going to be too much longer, but we'll all find out sometime soon. With that, I am asking that we move into a closed session. And for today, this is to discuss the personnel matter and to obtain legal advice under general provisions 3-305B1 and B5 regarding the appointment of a new Secretary of Higher Education. And so if I could have a motion for us to move into closed session, and then a second. Commissioner Serrano and Commissioner McDaniels, and we do need to do a formal roll call on this for voting. So Debbie, could you take that? Is Debbie still with us?
Yeah, sure. I'm here. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner McDaniels,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Barreau, Commissioner Barreau. What is your vote? Is she still here?
I'm not saying, Debbie, let's move on. As long as we have a quorum, we can move on. So let's get the rest of the votes.
Okay. Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Serrano?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Sellinger,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis.
I think she left.
Oh, okay. I thought she was still on, or I thought she came back.
Oh, did she? Okay.
Commissioner Davis, are you there still? And Chair Surkamp.
Yes.
So it looks like.
I'm
Sorry?
sorry. I'm here. I was unable to mute myself for momentarily. Unmute myself.
Oh, okay, great. Thank
So
you.
yes, I vote yes. Thank you.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
so we have a successful motion to move into closed session. And so let's close out of this session, and there's a new link that was provided to you by Selma Kedia, and come back in on that link for the closed session. Again, thank you all very much, staff. Always good to see you, and commissioners, I'll see you in just a minute or two.